Humanity's arrival on the galactic stage was supposed to be a quiet note in an already crowded symphony. At first glance, there was nothing exceptional about them: soft-bodied, oxygen-dependent, limited lifespan, and evolved on a world classified by most archivists as barely habitable. Yet the first observers returned with reports that didn't make sense. A species that should have died out millions of years ago had somehow become dominant on a planet built to erase life. Their world was a catalogue of lethal absurdities: weather systems that could tear cities apart, predators that hunted with merciless efficiency, pathogens that mutated faster than defenses could form. Yet humans not only survived, they thrived, multiplied, and adapted with a persistence bordering on defiance. Those early surveys began circulating across the quieter channels of the galactic network. They were meant to be curiosities, anthropological oddities, until patterns began to surface. Every time humans encountered hardship, they didn't merely endure, they changed. They rebuilt. They improved. They grew stronger. Their history revealed a species consistently walking into the jaws of extinction, then punching its way back out. They had crossed fire, plague, famine, war, collapse, and environmental chaos more times than most civilizations could fathom. But what truly unsettled alien analysts was the human response to crisis. They faced the unthinkable with a strange blend of stubbornness and optimism, a refusal to accept failure even when logic said it was inevitable. Their physiology added another layer of unease. Humans were pain-tolerant to a disturbing degree. Their bodies could bleed heavily and still keep functioning. Broken bones weren't immediate death sentences. Sometimes humans kept fighting with them. Their immune systems operated like aggressive, improvisational armies. Their brains ran on a cocktail of chemicals that encouraged risk-taking, loyalty, sacrifice, and irrational courage. The more the experts studied them, the more one question spread across the scientific forums: how could a species built from so many biological disadvantages become so statistically successful? Contact didn't answer the question, it made it worse. Humans approached the wider galaxy with friendly curiosity, but beneath their politeness was an unmistakable aura of readiness. They were calm in dangerous environments where other species panicked. They handled unknown threats with a practiced steadiness that suggested centuries of familiarity with chaos. And they smiled, far too often, far too easily, especially in situations where smiling made no sense at all. For many alien cultures, the smile became an early warning. A human who grinned in a crisis wasn't losing control, they were preparing to overcome it. Diplomatic envoys recorded moments that unsettled veterans of interspecies negotiations. Humans volunteered for hazardous tasks without hesitation. They insisted on helping weaker species even when it offered no benefit. They protected strangers. They walked toward danger to shield others from it. That kind of self-sacrifice was rare in the galaxy, and extremely dangerous from a strategic standpoint. A species willing to risk itself for ideals was a species capable of impossible things. Behind closed doors, analysts started referring to humanity with terms normally reserved for apex predators: unpredictable, tenacious, and dangerously adaptive. Many argued that humans weren't a typical emerging civilization. They were a force of nature that happened to learn diplomacy before conquest. Their technological rise only reinforced the concern. Every new piece of technology was rapidly stress-tested, iterated, broken, rebuilt, and improved until it surpassed its original design. Humans approached progress the same way they approached survival: try, fail, refine, repeat, faster than logic should allow. As rumors and fragmented reports spread, a quiet consensus formed among the more cautious powers: antagonizing humanity was unwise. And yet the galaxy had no unified voice, no single authority capable of guiding everyone. Some factions dismissed the warnings as exaggerations. Others believed humans were merely enthusiastic newcomers. A few saw opportunity where they should have seen danger. And so, humanity continued exploring, building alliances, and learning the rhythms of a galaxy that had never encountered anything quite like them. The truth was simple, though few recognized it early enough: humans weren't the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They were something far more terrifying, relentlessly capable of becoming whatever the situation required. They were the species that walked out of extinction events as if they were training exercises. They were the survivors of a world that tried every day to kill them and failed every time. The galaxy would soon learn what that truly meant. The chain of events that led to war began with a single miscalculation. The Vorthal Dominion, a mid-tier power known for rigid hierarchy and unwarranted arrogance, had observed humanity's rapid integration into the galactic community with growing irritation. To them, humans were newcomers who had advanced too quickly, gained allies too easily, and disrupted long-standing political balances without even realizing it. What bothered the Dominion most was the way smaller species gravitated toward humans, seeking protection, partnership, or simply the comfort of knowing someone genuinely cared if they survived. The Vorthal leadership interpreted this as an emerging threat to their influence, not a shift in values. Their intelligence council reviewed reports about humans but dismissed the warnings. They saw the adaptability described in those documents as exaggeration, assuming the analysts had been overly cautious. The Dominion had dealt with enthusiastic primitives before, and they believed humans were no different, soft, sentimental, and inexperienced. That perception hardened into a strategy: intimidate humanity into diplomatic submission before they grew strong enough to challenge the Dominion's authority. The first act was subtle. Trade routes established by human colonies were taxed without agreement. Communication relays were disrupted. Patrols were, accidentally, sent across human borders. None of these actions were violent, but each was deliberately provocative. The Dominion watched closely, expecting panic or retreat. Instead, humanity responded with measured communications, requesting clarification and offering to negotiate. The Dominion misread that restraint as weakness. Then came the incident that changed everything. A human research vessel, the Solace Dawn, was charting a nebula claimed by no one. The crew was civilian, unarmed, and transmitting identification beacons across all standard frequencies. Dominion warships intercepted it, accusing the humans of espionage. When the captain attempted to open a channel, the lead Vorthal commander disabled the ship's engines with a precision strike. The attack ruptured containment fields, resulting in catastrophic internal failures. 32 researchers died before rescue ships could arrive. The Dominion publicly called it an unfortunate accident. Privately, they celebrated the lesson. They believed the humans would protest, maybe sanction them, but ultimately swallow the humiliation. What they didn't understand was the human threshold for provocation. Every species had a line that should not be crossed. The Dominion had just trampled over humanity's. Earth's response was not dramatic. There were no threats, no shouting, no displays of fury. Instead, a human representative spoke at the next interstellar assembly in a voice calm enough to unsettle everyone present. The message was precise. The attack had been deliberate, the deaths unacceptable, and the Dominion's dismissive explanation an insult to every principle humanity upheld. The room felt colder when the representative concluded with a single line that circulated across the galaxy within hours. "If you wish to test our resolve, you should have chosen a less personal method." Still, the Dominion refused to retreat. Their leadership issued a formal statement accusing humans of emotional overreaction and warned them not to escalate the situation. They believed humanity's reputation for compassion meant they would avoid conflict. They underestimated the difference between compassion and passivity. The turning point arrived when Dominion forces launched a second strike, this time targeting a relief convoy supplying medical aid to a plague-stricken world allied with humans. The convoy transmitted pleas for disengagement, identified themselves repeatedly, and attempted evasive maneuvers. The Dominion ignored it. 2 ships were destroyed. Hundreds died. At that moment, the ambiguity ended. There was no accident to hide behind, no diplomatic veneer to preserve. The Dominion had crossed from provocation to aggression. Every human colony received the same transmission from the United Earth Directorate. The Dominion has declared hostilities through sustained attacks on civilian life. Defensive mobilization authorized. Across the galaxy, analysts who had studied human behavior understood the gravity instantly. The Dominion had made the fatal mistake of assuming humanity feared war. But humans did not fear challenge, they feared only failing to protect those who depended on them. Once that responsibility was invoked, the decision was irreversible. The Dominion believed they had intimidated a young civilization. In reality, they had awakened the one force no empire should ever provoke. They had declared war on a species engineered by hardship, forged by adversity, and prepared for conflict long before they ever touched the stars. Humanity's mobilization did not begin with loud declarations or grand parades. It began with an immediate, coordinated shift that rippled through every colony, fleet outpost, and scientific station. The moment the directive was issued, human systems transitioned into wartime efficiency with a precision that startled observers. Industries recalibrated production lines within hours. Civilian research hubs redirected their talent toward defensive technologies. Transport networks adapted to military prioritization without chaos or delay. It wasn't anger driving them, it was responsibility, a collective understanding that inaction meant more innocent lives lost. What alien strategists noted first was speed. Most species required months to restructure their infrastructure for war. Humans completed the transition in days. Their distributed networks, decentralized decision-making, and cultural familiarity with crisis allowed them to adapt faster than any predictive model anticipated. It didn't matter whether someone lived on a core world or a distant outpost, they reacted with the same unified determination. Volunteers poured into recruitment centers not out of nationalism, but out of the shared belief that the Dominion's aggression could not go unanswered. Military analysts from allied species observed another striking pattern. Humans trained relentlessly, but without theatrics. They approached preparation like a scientific process, focused, iterative, and brutally pragmatic. Every lesson learned from past conflicts, disasters, or accidents was applied without hesitation. Simulations ran constantly, pushing both veterans and new recruits to their limits. Humans didn't romanticize war, they treated it as a dangerous problem that demanded competence and discipline. Even their instructors emphasized survival, precision, and protection over glory. Technological adaptation became the second shockwave across the galaxy. Humanity had acquired a range of alien technologies through trade and cooperation, but instead of merely replicating them, they re-engineered them. In a short span, human engineers improved weapon stabilizers, rewired shield harmonics, and redesigned propulsion systems to output more thrust without sacrificing stability. The Dominion had assumed that humanity's reliance on borrowed tech made them vulnerable. Instead, humans demonstrated an unnerving ability to improve anything they touched, often beyond the original creator's expectations. The psychological aspect of human mobilization unnerved adversaries the most. Allied intelligence teams publicly noted that the average human soldier demonstrated a resilience rating far above standard galactic metrics. They absorbed stress, adapted to unpredictable conditions, and remained functional under pressures that caused breakdowns in other species. But what unsettled analysts more was the human mindset. They fought with purpose, not hatred. Even as they prepared for war, there was no clamor for destruction or revenge. Their focus remained on defending their people, restoring security, and preventing further tragedies. That clarity made them far more dangerous than rage ever could. Human fleets began assembling quietly but efficiently. Newly retrofitted ships emerged from dry docks with enhanced capabilities. Drones, tactical AIs, reconnaissance vessels, and mobile repair platforms formed support networks that made human fleets more flexible than traditional armadas. Instead of relying solely on overwhelming strength, they built systems designed for rapid adaptation. If a plan failed, humans didn't collapse, they adjusted. If a battle turned unpredictable, they created new strategies on the fly. Galactic observers had seen aggressive species and disciplined species, but never a species that combined innovation with sheer perseverance at this scale. Messages sent across the stellar coalition revealed how seriously humanity took its alliances. Medical teams, engineers, and supply ships were deployed to assist partner worlds vulnerable to Dominion retaliation. Humanity treated their allies not as assets but as lives worth protecting. This earned them a level of trust that no diplomatic treaty could replicate. Many species who had hesitated before now pledged aid, not out of fear, but out of respect and gratitude. The Dominion misjudged this unity entirely. They believed humanity's empathy would slow them down. Instead, it galvanized them. Humans weren't mobilizing for conquest. They were mobilizing to ensure the attacks on civilians would never be repeated. For every ship destroyed, they built 2 replacements. For every fallen researcher from the Solace Dawn or victim from the relief convoy, thousands stepped forward to ensure their deaths meant something. Humanity's war machine wasn't built on dominance. It was built on resolve. A collective promise echoed in every command center, every training facility, and every starship cockpit: protect their own, safeguard allies, and stop the Dominion before more lives were taken. By the time the Dominion realized the scale of humanity's mobilization, the window for prevention had closed. The humans they once dismissed as inexperienced newcomers had transformed into a coordinated force preparing to meet aggression with decisive action. The galaxy watched as humanity stood ready, not with intimidation, but with unshakable determination. The war the Dominion thought they could control had already slipped beyond their grasp. The first engagements shattered every assumption the Dominion held. Their commanders expected human fleets to rely on borrowed designs and predictable tactics. Instead, they encountered opponents who treated the battlefield like an evolving puzzle, one to be studied, adapted to, and solved with relentless precision. Human ships moved with coordination that suggested a deep understanding of each other's instincts. They shifted formations fluidly, communicated rapidly, and responded to surprises as though anticipating them seconds before they happened. In the opening confrontation, Dominion vessels attempted a standard encirclement, a tactic that had intimidated countless adversaries. Humans countered by collapsing their formation inward, forcing close-range combat where their modified thrusters and reinforced hulls gave them the advantage. Dominion strategists were stunned. No simulation had predicted that maneuver. They were even more unsettled by the human crew's calm under pressure. Where other species faltered when systems failed, humans improvised. When shields flickered, engineers rerouted power manually. When targeting algorithms broke, gunners switched to visual calculation without missing critical shots. Reports from Dominion survivors painted a picture of unnerving resilience. They described humans who continued fighting through smoke-filled corridors, patching breaches with whatever materials were on hand, and carrying injured crew members while defending their positions. Damage that should have incapacitated them only drove them to work faster. Dominion Command initially dismissed these accounts as exaggeration. But as more encounters took place, the pattern became undeniable. In ground operations, the gap in adaptability widened further. Dominion troops relied on rigid formations and pre-planned maneuvers, assuming humans would break under superior firepower. Instead, humans exploited terrain, turned wreckage into cover, and advanced with coordinated bursts that disrupted Dominion lines. They used environmental hazards to their advantage, navigating conditions that Dominion soldiers considered impossible to endure. Whether it was toxic winds, unstable surfaces, or shifting gravity fields, humans adjusted without hesitation. What alarmed Dominion leadership most was the humans' ability to turn setbacks into strategic advantages. When a forward operating base was overrun, human forces didn't retreat, they repurposed the ruins into a trap. When supply lines were strained, their logistics teams devised new routes to regions other species avoided. Every attempt to create pressure only revealed more ways humans could bend without breaking. Allied observers noticed another defining trait: humans protected civilians with absolute priority. During the liberation of a trading outpost seized by the Dominion, human units took longer routes, absorbed heavier fire, and risked their own survival to extract trapped non-combatants. Their willingness to endure hardship for the sake of others inspired local populations, many of whom began resisting Dominion forces themselves. This unexpected morale shift undermined the Dominion's authority across multiple sectors. Human ingenuity manifested even more clearly in space. Engineers performed repairs during active combat, securing hull plates externally while the ship maneuvered. Pilots executed maneuvers considered reckless but calculated them with uncanny accuracy. AI-assisted targeting systems developed by human technicians adapted dynamically to Dominion shielding frequencies, bypassing defenses that were supposed to be impregnable. Each victory revealed a new layer of human capability. Each defeat taught them something they incorporated immediately. As momentum shifted, internal fractures began appearing within the Dominion. Officers argued over how to counter an enemy that refused to follow any established pattern. Attempts to match human unpredictability failed because Dominion doctrine discouraged deviation. Morale plummeted as rumors spread describing humans as unstoppable, tireless, and disturbingly hard to kill. In several skirmishes, Dominion crews abandoned their ships prematurely out of sheer panic. Throughout the campaign, humans maintained the same focused discipline they had shown during mobilization. They issued no threats, made no boasts, and executed operations with the intention of ending the conflict swiftly. Their objective was not extermination, it was containment and protection. But their efficiency was misinterpreted by many in the galaxy as ruthlessness. To an outside observer, humans looked like a species that grew sharper the harder they were pushed. The decisive battles forced the Dominion to confront an undeniable truth. They were no longer fighting a young civilization. They were fighting the distilled product of a world that forged resilience through constant adversity. Every planet scorched by storms, every creature that had hunted early humans, every catastrophe carved into their history had prepared them for this moment. The Dominion realized too late that they had entered a war against a species that did not fear challenge, exhaustion, or uncertainty. Humans didn't simply adapt to battle, they adapted to win it. When the final Dominion stronghold fell silent, the shockwave across the galaxy was immediate. Worlds that had watched from a distance, some fearful, others doubtful, now saw clearly what humanity was capable of when pushed to defend life. Yet what followed was not the sweeping conquest many expected. Instead, humanity moved with a restraint that unsettled even their allies. They halted their advance the moment the Dominion's chain of command collapsed, refusing to exploit the power vacuum. Their fleets shifted from offensive posture to stabilization duties, focusing on securing trade lanes, evacuating displaced civilians, and restoring critical infrastructure destroyed by Dominion withdrawals. The surrender negotiations revealed a side of humanity the Dominion had never anticipated. Instead of demanding tribute or territory, the human delegation insisted on accountability for the attacks on civilians, reparations directed entirely toward the damaged neutral worlds, and guarantees that Dominion leadership would not repeat their aggression. They refused offers of annexed star systems, making it clear they had never fought for expansion. This confused many Dominion officials, who had always assumed war was about dominance. Humanity's refusal to claim spoils was a statement louder than any threat. They did not fight to grow an empire. They fought because innocent lives had been endangered. Across former Dominion territories, a transformation began. Populations long oppressed by their rulers now saw human relief ships arriving with medical aid, engineers, and supplies. Many had expected conquerors. Instead, they found teams dedicated to rebuilding power grids, treating the wounded, and distributing resources with impartial efficiency. Human personnel treated alien civilians with the same urgency they would have shown their own. This approach dismantled generations of propaganda that had painted humanity as reckless newcomers destined to destabilize the galaxy. What spread even faster than the reconstruction efforts were the stories. Survivors recounted how humans had shielded them during evacuations, carried injured strangers across battlefields, and diverted fire to protect those who couldn't defend themselves. The tales were shared across stations, markets, academies, and political halls, reshaping the perception of humanity into something complex, dangerous beyond measure, yet principled to the point of discomfort. A species that could unleash devastating force but chose to restrain it was far more intimidating than one that sought domination. Within the Dominion, internal reckoning began. Officers and officials who had pushed for confrontation learned the scale of their misjudgment. Reports documenting human adaptability, durability, and unity were reviewed with disbelief. The notion that humanity had entered the war reluctantly and ended it decisively forced many to confront the truth. The Dominion had started a conflict with a species they fundamentally failed to understand. Those who survived now openly acknowledged that humans were not a political inconvenience. They were a force capable of reshaping the galactic order simply by existing. In the wider galaxy, policy shifts occurred almost immediately. Neutral coalitions re-evaluated their defense doctrines. Military academies added entire courses analyzing humanity's strategic behavior. Trade guilds began seeking human partnerships, recognizing their reliability under pressure. And among species previously oppressed by the Dominion, humanity became a symbol of hope, a reminder that powerful civilizations could choose protection over exploitation. Yet humanity remained consistent. They issued a broadcast to every major faction, outlining their intentions: cooperation where possible, neutrality where needed, and firm defense of life if threatened. There were no boasts, no declarations of superiority, just a concise promise that echoed with unmistakable resolve. Many leaders noted the unusual simplicity of the message. Others recognized the deeper truth: humans did not need to posture. Their actions had spoken for them. The Dominion's defeat carved a single lesson into galactic history. Strength did not lie in overwhelming firepower or ancient lineage. It lay in the will to protect, the capacity to adapt, and the refusal to surrender when others would break. Humanity embodied all three to an extent unseen before. For every empire watching, the conclusion was unavoidable. To harm humanity was to invite a conflict that no rational species would wish to endure. To stand beside them, however, was to gain an ally who valued every life they swore to defend. From that point forward, every star nation remembered the unwritten rule that traveled faster than any fleet: avoid provoking the species that had turned survival itself into a skill honed across millennia. Humanity had proven that they never sought war, but if war found them, it ended on their terms.